Okay, here we go. Welcome. We're going to look at tree or vrikshasana today. So there's many aspects of tree pose that I want to get to today. One thing that I'm going to gloss over a little bit because we cover the topic in other asanas is the feet. So very important to review Tadasana feet or mountain seat and review good footwork. I have several lessons regarding both footwork and Tadasana and others. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the feet. So if you have further questions about the work of the feet, please refer to some of the other lessons. But I will, just in short, I will say that we want ultimately a balance between we're going to be moving on to one foot. So let's address one foot balancing on the floor. So we want to have a balance between the outer foot, the inner foot, the front of the foot, the back of the foot. Now, many things can influence the distribution of weight across the feet, but we do want to work towards that nice, even balance of the feet on the floor. So, quick review. One thing we can do is we can lift the toes up in order to activate the arches of the feet, the inner arch, the outer arch, even the middle arch. Don't worry about it yet. If you're not sure, we can cover it another time. And we want to have a balance in the ankle so that the ankle isn't sickling in one direction or rolling in at the other direction. Now, one thing that can affect the balance of the foot front to back is the shape of the knee. So, if, for example, if one tends to overextend the knees, in other words, we have to define our terms a little bit here. You see, the problem is we tell people to straighten their legs, but for people who can hyperextend, they can push their knees all the way back. Mine aren't very hyperextended, so you might have to use your imagination a little bit. But for folks with hyperextension, the line of the knees kind of goes behind the ankles and the hips, so you end up with more of a curved shape, which is not straight, right? But because we tell people with hyperextended legs that their legs are straight when their knees are back, they associate the word straight with a feeling in their knees. But if we speak about straight in a particularly geometric way, then pushing the knees all the way back is not a straight leg. In fact, a straight leg occurs when, use your x-ray vision, when the lower leg bone, when the knee can be above the ankle, so you could say shin perpendicular to the floor, and then when the hips are over the knees. So I'm doing my best, even though I can't see my own legs, I'm doing my best to recreate hip over knee over ankle, which in my case means that the knees are slightly soft. They're not like soft. They're not locked back. And in fact, I can have straight legs, meaning hips over knees over ankles, and still engage the muscles of my upper legs. That's one thing we don't always talk about, is that sometimes when we use the language of like micro bend, well, first of all, what does micro bend mean, right? Does micro bend mean this much or this much, or who's to say what a micro bend is? So to me, micro bend isn't as descriptive and accurate as it could be. although similar concept. So if you're familiar with the language of microbend, that's what I'm talking about here. So I can have my knees not completely in their locked position, and I can still engage the muscles of my legs, which is oftentimes very difficult to bring about in someone who's used to hyperextending. We're not used to accessing the muscles of the legs in a not locked position. So it can take some getting used to. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't try it, right? In fact, if we're in a yoga practice, we are often on purpose doing things that are hard and maybe counterintuitive and maybe don't come naturally to us. So here we are. So I'm gonna have that. So let's get back to the feet for a second. For someone who is used to locking out their knees in order to have that feeling of straight legs, which is not actually straight legs, their weight will often be pitched back into the heels, and that will often cause either a gripping of the toes, or if you can see my feet, you can see the little tendons like sticking up out of the top of the feet. So first things first is to create a straight leg, and with a straight leg also try to create a strong leg. We can get to that. Even if it feels counterintuitive right now, just start to think about that idea. Okay, so straight leg and strong leg. Also, you'll notice that if I push my knees all the way back, my knees tend to turn a little bit inwards. So if I can get the kneecaps and the toes and everything like pointing straight ahead, and I have that straight shape in the legs, and I have strength, activation in the legs, we're halfway to tree pose. Okay? But the thing that I want to sort of zero in on today, I mean, there's so many things. We could talk about infinite things with tree pose. But the thing I sort of want to bring our attention to in more detail is the hips. In particular, the way that we turn our up leg, the way that we turn the up leg out as we explore tree or vrikshasana. So actually, everyone go ahead and stand with your back body at the wall. Now, if you stand with your heels all the way pressed at the wall, then actually the weight is probably just a little bit too forward. Like for me, it pushes me into my toes. So I have my heels maybe 2 centimeters away from the wall so that I can feel the weight really evenly on both feet and stand up tall. Now, with your back against the wall, you'll notice that some parts of the back body touch the wall and others don't. My shoulders and my buttocks touch the wall. My lower back doesn't. I'm going to push the back of my head back slightly so that my head also touches the wall, but just feel what that feels like. And then bring your hands onto your ASIS, the bony part of the front of the crest of the pelvis, and then turn the right foot out to the right. Bend the right knee, and you can set the right foot anywhere along the inner left leg, anywhere along the leg. Just try not to hook your heel right above the part of the knee that's sort of round, because that's it might feel convenient, but it might not be great for the knee. Who knows? So I say who knows because for some people it will cause a problem and for others it won't, and you just don't know who you are. So let's be safe and not do it. So hands on your hips. And I want you to feel both buttocks up against the wall. Now, you'll notice that the right knee is pointing out at a little bit of an angle. If I try to push my right leg back to meet the wall, go ahead and try this with me. if I try to push the right leg towards the wall so that the right knee is pointing directly to the right, well then my hips have twisted. Notice the position of the hands has twisted. My left buttock has come away from the wall, and my standing leg is doing an awful lot of twisting. My foot is twisting, my ankle is twisting, my knee is twisting. There's a whole lot of torquing going on. Okay, so there's no possible way to get the right knee to point directly to the right, even if you are the world's most prima ballerina and you have excellent external rotation. Even so, you can't get it totally to the right without cheating somewhere else, okay? So, keeping the buttocks pressing against the wall, keep your left hand on your left hip, but then put the right hand sort of to the inner right knee. And I'm gonna push both of my hands almost away from one another, almost like I'm trying to spread the front of the pelvis there. And there I can get a little bit more of my turnout on my right leg while keeping the left buttock against the wall. So that's about the maximum. That's probably the maximum of what angle you can get with the lifted leg. And keep in mind the two legs are different, but let's switch legs and do a slightly different exercise so that we can feel that idea in a slightly different way. So, have your block, have your buttocks against the wall, which means that the heels are probably a couple centimeters away from the wall. Bend the left knee, and again, place the left knee anywhere along the right inner leg that's not directly on the knee joint. And then you're gonna place the block behind the left knee. Now, you have to experiment with it a little bit because some of us might need to have the block on the second setting. Some of us, maybe with a little more turnout, could have the block on the smallest setting, but you're gonna try to hold it there, right? So I'm gonna push my left leg back against the block, and I'm gonna try to keep it there while keeping both buttocks in and against the wall. Woo! Okay, hold that block before you let go of it, and then get rid of that block. Okay. So, I wanted us to feel it both from the stretching standpoint and from the strengthening standpoint, because, you know, no single movement is just no single movement is just flexibility or just strength, right? In order to get, we can bring about a feeling of opening here, but that requires a strengthening at the opposite side of the body. So that's why we experienced it in two different ways. The first side, we were more focusing our mind on what it took to open the inside of the leg. And on the second side, we were focusing our mind on what it took to strengthen the back part of the leg to create the same opening. It's not necessarily the case that the experiences were inherently different. It's just that our consciousness was on a different part of the leg, so therefore our experience of it was a bit different. Okay. So, so this just goes to show that when you're in the center of the room and you're trying to open your up leg because we're all good students and we're all trying to be good students. And so we sometimes think that if we open the leg more, then we must be doing tree better. And I'm making the case that that is not the objective of tree. In fact, much, much better to give yourself a little bit of space to point the hips straight ahead, both buttocks against an imaginary wall, and then there is an angle to the front leg. There is. Here's another way. Here's another way to sort of find that angle in your lateral rotation. So if you stand with your feet together is good. You can do this with the feet apart, but if you can bring the feet together, it's nice. It's a nice way to feel it. So you're going to try to open both feet to the sides at the same time. I'm going to say that again because I'm psychic and I know that even when I said that instruction, I know that what you did is turned out the right foot and then turned out the left foot, or opposite, right? One and one. We do that because when we set one foot into place first and then open the other foot, we can kind of leverage that foot and create more external rotation than we actually have, right? And in fact, I can feel this in my knees because I was wrenching myself around so much. So try to avoid doing that. The way to avoid doing it is to try to open the feet at exactly the same time and just set them down where they're gonna land. and then if you look down at your feet, your foot will be pointing, assuming that foot and knee are approximately the same and you haven't torqued the foot wider. Assuming that you really genuinely opened both feet out as far as they could go on their own, then your foot ought to be pointing at about the same angle that your knee is going to point in tree. So for me, if I just center let's do the other one. So if I center my left foot, which is going to be my standing leg first, and then I start to bend my right knee and place my right foot against my left leg, and if I keep that angle, that's pretty true to my true turnout. And then maybe by sort of squeezing the outer buttocks, maybe I can get just a teensy bit more out of it. Okay? Let's try that on the other side. So I'm going to open both feet without falling. And then I'm going to turn my right foot in because that's going to be my standing foot. And then I'm going to start to bend the left knee and draw the left foot up the inner right leg. And generally speaking, my knee is about the same angle as my foot was. But again, if I use that strength that we practiced at the wall to open those 2 points a little bit more, I'll be able to open ever so slightly more to the side, again, without falling. I mean, not a big deal if you fall. It's all an exploration anyway, and sometimes falling is part of it, and sometimes making mistakes is part of it. So feel free to fall all you want, as long as you're not recklessly endangering anyone around you. So let's see, where were we? Angle of the hip. I know there was something else I wanted to say about that. Give me one moment. Oh. Well, since we're getting into it anyway, and since we're on the hips, let's talk about standing hip for a moment. So, take the right foot into tree pose. Put your left hand on the outer left hip, just the very side part. And then let that side part of the hip kind of relax into your hand a bit. So you can actually see that I can balance perfectly fine with that hip out to the side. But I can have a different energetic experience if I push the left hip more in and underneath me. And in fact, I can feel the muscles on the side of the hip. Well, I can feel the muscles under the flesh on the side of the hip, but I can feel something deep, deep under there contracting and pulling in. Okay, so let that relax again. And then again, imagine that you're pushing the side hip in towards the center. Relax one more time. Sometimes yoga teachers use this instruction: push your foot down harder into the floor, which for me brings about the same action, but for you, maybe it doesn't. For some students, maybe it doesn't make sense. My foot is already on the floor. How can I push down further into the floor? It's already, what does that mean? To push the foot more into the floor. It's already in the floor, right? So you can use the instruction push the foot down if that works for you, or you can use pushing the hip in towards the center. In any case, that does bring about a certain feeling of not only stability, but again, let's not get stuck on stability because I can stay stable here. But it also brings about this feeling of energy sort of reaching down through the leg and back up through the earth. I think, let's switch legs. Whew. There's another Sanskrit name for tree. It's called padapa, and pada means foot, and padapa means like to pull up through the foot. So if you think about like how the roots of a tree like pull the water up through the earth, that can be a way to sort of bring our minds into that experience. Let's try the other side. So left foot to the inner thigh. So if I push down through the foot, it has the effect of also sort of bringing this upward energy, right? So pushing down and up at the same time, which, as we've discussed in other lessons, all of the asanas have these multiple directions of energy. Or if that doesn't work so much for you, again, you can think of pushing the side hip inwards and contracting those side hip muscles that are under the flesh there. And in any case, that can bring about this more energetic kind of pulling together of the whole shape. And, you know, please remember, there is a difference between just like the way that the muscles and the bones are lined up and the sort of energetic, what David Life used to call the sort of sacred geometry of it. That putting the muscles and bones in a certain order, in a certain placement is one thing, but then combining that with breath, with gaze, with intention, and with that energetic awareness, with that awareness of prana or consciousness moving through the body, that gives rise to the experience of asana, and it's not just a shape that we make with our body, right? So I hope that gives you some food for thought. And as I mentioned, we mostly just covered, you know, the hips in Vrikshasana, but there's, of course, infinite things to explore about all the asanas. So please keep practicing, keep learning, keep going to all the teachers who you feel like you get something out of, and you know, bring all of these experiences together in your practice. Thank you so much for being with me today.